What's happening in the canine industry? For all the latest news, views, and expert opinions, stay right here for the Canine Paradigm. You'll hear from industry leaders, experts, doyens of the industry, learned colleagues, movers and shakers, and the odd randy guest. Get the latest insights and expert advice from both here and abroad from the people in the know. Now, here are your hosts, Glenn Cook and Pat Stewart. And I'm Lofty Fulton, and I'm out of here.
Glenda?
Yes.
We have to do a new ad.
We do.
It's a solemn time. Our long-time sponsor of the show, George Kittredge,
Yes.
very, very sadly passed away. And we formerly used to advertise for him his Rowdy Hound boxes.
We did.
So we don't actually know what's happened with Rowdy Hound boxes. You know anything about that?
I looked at the website. It said that they're recalibrating since their founder and boss has passed. But nonetheless, I think that you and I want to honour the memory of George Kittredge anyway. He was a friend to both of us, a hell of a good guy, and he supported us almost immediately. He was on board through and through, and I just don't want any of us to forget George. He was a terrific human being.
So we intend to continue to advertise Rowdy Hound, even though we don't know what's going on with them.
Yep.
In the hopes that they keep going, and that can be a bit of George's legacy that we're able to continue to promote.
I hope so.
In checking it out, we had a look to see, because we're not real good with the sponsorship. So we had a look to see who's actually paying for sponsorship. And we have a list of people to tell you that we support. And the first is our sugar mama, Barbara de Groot.
She's been with us from the start as well. Barbara's been an absolute staple in our...
She's a gem.
She is a gem.
She has a business.
She does. From the Heart Dog Training.
From the Heart Dog Training.
Yeah.
You can check it out. But she supports us as much and more than anybody ever has. So we appreciate you very much, Barbara. Another person who's supported us from the start.
The Einzelwiener.
Einzelwiener.
The Bullfed.
The Bullfed.
Yep.
It's where I get all my stuff.
Yeah.
It is, truly. It's where I get all my dog gear. If I need something, Jason's my first point of call. I don't use his shit website. He has a website. It's dog shit. I just message him directly. You guys probably should use his shit website, but I don't.
Yeah, because you don't want to message him directly and get his grumpy ire of the day.
Yeah, but do it. Get all your dog stuff from Jason. He's got everything you need. He's got all the shit that you need to train a dog for realty.
Everybody who comes to seminars and looks at meals and asks me meals questions, ask Jason.
Yeah.
Jason can point you in the right direction for getting the meal that's best suited for you.
I really like his leashes. I'm a big fan of his leash pack. That's why I sort of convinced him to do it. But anyway, get your stuff from Einzelwiener.
Yep.
Do you know who has a fantastic website and ships internationally?
My wife?
Your wife,
Yeah.
Canine Pharmaceuticals.
I couldn't imagine her not having a good website, how much of a perfectionist she is.
Well, the products are amazing. My dog merely being alive is a walking testimonial to that. My dog, who I've retired numerous times and has come out of retirement when I've managed to get his body back to healthy. And a big part of that is related to Canine Pharmaceuticals. So check it out, everybody.
I could say so many nice and biased things about Canine Pharmaceuticals and my wife, but what I will say is ignore me. Just look at testimonials. The testimonials speak for themselves. That's where the field trials are working. What makes Narelle's day, and mine as well, is when people are emailing in and sending messages of, well, primarily people have had no hope in the past because just everything that they were trying wasn't working, and now it is. And that is the testament that something is actually really working. And the other thing which I will add, one of the things that Narelle's told me in the past is dogs are incapable of understanding the placebo effect.
Oh, that's a good point.
So you can fake it on a human, but you can't fake it on a dog.
I never thought about that before. That's actually a really good point.
Well, my wife's actually a very smart person.
There you go.
So she's told me that humans are subject to the placebo effect where dogs are not. So it either works or it doesn't on dogs.
There you go. That makes total sense.
Yep.
There's one other person who puts a fair amount of work into this show.
Yeah.
It's me.
Yeah. Funny about that.
And I have a digital product that you can buy. If you go to my website, seriousdogbusiness.com, right now I've got 2 courses available to you. The Overview, which is a small course where you could learn how I teach.
Yep.
But the other one is the Wave Tops, which is a bigger course. It's everything I know about dog training. Well, it's not everything. It's a lot of what I know about dog training.
Yeah,
Check it
terrific.
out.
Yeah.
$500 dues. That's all it's going to cost you.
I recommend it when people are saying, what do I do? How do I get in the industry? I recommend them to your course.
Oh, wonderful. Thanks,
Yeah.
sir. All right, on with the show. Welcome back to the Canine Paradigm. I'm your host, Pat Stewart. I'm joined in studio today by my co-host, Glenn Cook.
What are we here for?
It's a circle jerk.
It is. It's the end of the year.
It's their 2024 to 2025 circle jerk.
Amazing.
We
got
did
through
it.
another one. We did it.
What do you think of the year?
Not one of my favorites.
No?
No. There were some good things that happened throughout the year. To highlight some of those good things, I mean, I got to go to Vietnam and judge a trial for the first Southeast Asian region to judge the trial over there, and that was fantastic. Tenoa did a great job of setting that up, helping organise all the crew over there, and then they subsequently went on and had another trial, and they've done very well, and there's been others in Malaysia, and there's going to be more in Thailand coming up. So very exciting stuff. And I was really excited for them. It was nice to meet them. Such a lovely group of people, very enthusiastic. Their hosting was incredible. They were incredibly friendly, lovely to deal with, very proud of what they were doing and what they were achieving. And so they should be. They did a terrific job. And one of our decoys, Scotty, was over there, and they went on to get their first PSA 1 title, which was from Quack and Cody. I knew Quack was going to be the first one to break it. He's got a IGP3 dog. Cody's a really good Mal. Quack's a great handler, a good trainer. He's got his own school over there that he helps decoy and train, and
nice.
Very switched on guy. So couldn't be prouder of him. He attempted his first PSA 1 with me when I was there, and I said to him at the time, if you get Cody over his ball obsession, and that was all he had, and I said, mate, you're going to sail straight into a title. I said, this dog is ready to go. You just got to teach him not to.
It was just the field trash.
Just the field trash. He was just never seen a trial with so many toys on it.
Yeah.
And it was like Candyland for him. He came out and he went, And I said, as soon as he's over this, you'll literally nail it straight away. And he did. He did it on the weekend. He got through it. So it was lovely to see. So things like that were pretty cool. If you reflect on it, it's like relationships. You can get to an end of something, and because the job, the relationship or the year ended in the last month or so, it wasn't so good, you can focus on that and think the whole year was just shit. Where that's not quite true. I think for many of us here and abroad, I think the government's fucking tinkering around with the interest rates has really put a lot of pressure on families, and I think that's what's got people a little bit down. But there's always cause for focusing on something negative, and there's always cause for focusing on celebrations as well. One of the things that I did want to talk about, which we haven't mentioned in any of the other episodes, was how excited and proud I was for Emma and Zoe from Canada to go over to the PSA Worlds. And for Emma to get world title with her dog and Zoe to come up second. So
in the level 2.
In the level 2. So from meeting them in IACP all those years ago and them getting infectiously involved in PSA, starting their own club over there, sourcing and getting dogs getting into the Worlds and actually placing. Well done, ladies.
Yeah,
that was
incredible.
It's awesome. Really, and for Anne Quigley as well. Like she's, she's a super handler and trainer with her dog. So
winning the 3s.
Winning the 3s. Shame we couldn't be there. It was just a difficult time with Narelle and I being there earlier in the year and just couldn't extend over, and travel was difficult for both of us at that point in time. So would have been lovely to see, but super proud of you nonetheless.
Yeah, it's awesome for them, for sure.
Anyone that does well in any of the worlds, like the dog sports, Mondio, PSA, Schutzen. I mean, PSA is obviously
that's what we're tracking.
It's our sport of passion. But any of the people who do well in the worlds and the championships and so forth, but even the regionals and even the club trials, good on you for getting out and doing fun and cool shit with your dog.
Every year we do a circle jerk.
We do.
At the end of the year, we kind of congratulate each other. And then we sort of prep for the next year.
Yes.
And I like to sort of give a bit of a pep talk to everybody, because it's kind of a pep talk to myself as well, right? I just say it out loud and I'm kind of doing it. But you wanted to talk about time and importance of appreciating what you have. Let's start there.
The concept of this really got me kicking off. We've talked about a few personal things as we've been going along over years, and especially in the last episode, I reflected on some things that have happened over my life and contemplating those. I won't bullshit. It's a struggle talking about it sometimes, but the aftermath of being able to talk about it with other people who've endured similar. People have contacted me via social media during the week and said, hey man, thanks for talking about that shit, because I've been battling this shit for years. I feel that it's given people access to understanding that shit goes down in your life sometimes and things happen, and sometimes it's completely beyond your control. And I feel that a lot of times, especially men, feel like it's taboo to talk about. It's not just men. Like there's been men and women who have been reaching out to me during the week and said, I can't thank you and Pat enough for talking about topics that most people tactfully avoid and won't discuss and won't share because it doesn't make interesting or exciting social media content. But a lot of time, when we talk about time, a lot of time, unfortunately with people on social media, they don't realize that they're using it to fill some hole in their life. I think at times people start to realize that that hole is never ending, like it's a bottomless pit. And you kind of feel like the virtue signaling that you're trying to do through things like social media. I'm not going to totally make social media the demon, but we kind of feel that I've just got this bottomless pit. I need to shovel something into it to try and make up some space that feels very all-consuming at times. People do it through gambling. People do it through porn addiction. Addiction is addiction, no matter what it is. And I feel that a lot of times I've seen people on social media and they've been throwing out a lot of content there. And yet other times I've seen those very same people talk about their vulnerabilities. And I thought, good for you. You know, at least you are letting people know that you do suffer some social anxieties and that having access to genuine people is the healing, not just the content that you're putting out there. Not scorning social media. I like some good news on social media. I like a pat on the back too. I put out some trashy shit on social media from time to time, and I put some comedy out there, and I do like it sometimes when people come back to me and said, hey, I really got a laugh out of that. I got a giggle out of it. And I said, yeah, me too. Some of it was senseless, some of it was stupid, but it's usually attached to something educational, and I appreciate the pat on the back from it as well. Let's get on to the concept of time. Through previous episodes, ongoing throughout many of the years that we've done this, I've touched on this topic multiple times. As you start to age, things start to shift in perspective. You realize those sands are running low. You start contemplating and start thinking, unless something tragic happens, I have got 1/3 of my time left. Suddenly, the things that you never really focused on or that you never felt were really important, you start to shift gaze and start to think there are other things now important to me. And you'll go through that in your life. Like I think every 10 years after you sort of turn 30, you start to really adjust your sails. Some people do it in 5-year increments. Like they kind of look at it as the 5-year plan or the 10-year plan. And they start to adjust their scales. They start to think to themselves, what really is important? A lot of the times people go and double down on money. Like it's a financial thing to them. And they kind of believe that money is the answer to the problem. Sometimes it is. There was an old saying, I used to have it on a T-shirt. I remember I had it as a kid, and it said, life is like a shit sandwich. The more bread you have, the less shit you have to eat. I used to wear that and not really knowing the true meaning of it, but I just loved the humor of it. It was a bit grubby and a bit taboo, and I like that. These days I kind of think of that. I've seen a lot of people, again, on social media criticizing people for not stepping up and not cashing in and not living your best life through financial freedoms and so forth. What they're not making people aware of, that while you're out there fucking grinding it and crushing it and putting your fucking head to the grindstone all the time is passing by. There have been multiple people that I've known that said, yeah, I've had some fun. I made some good cash. I also got to a stage where I realized that I cut a lot of important topics or people out of my life, and I didn't realize that the time had just gone by. And suddenly I'm here and I realize, well, I want all that back, but it's too late because the time has passed. Even with thinking about my dogs and thinking about some of the people in my life and some of those things that were really important to me, I reflect on the conversation I had several years ago about my addiction to World of Warcraft. When I used to just come home, and because I was in a raiding crew, that to me was very important at the time. That was what I was fixated on. That's where I got my dopamine from. That's what I was addicted to. Everyone wanted my character because my character was a pivotal point in doing raids. So they'd message me while I was at work and say, hey, don't forget, there's a raid tonight. We need you. I felt very important. I felt very loved through that game. So of course I was addicted to it. People wanted me. People wanted my abilities. And then I kind of realized I don't even know in real life any of these people. They are just voices behind a microphone in a game that I'm playing. And meanwhile, I was shutting my friends, my close family, my dog training, everything was getting shelved. I think about 2 years passed and I kind of realized, holy shit, I just lost 2 years of time. And mate, I'm talking savage addiction. Like every single day, As soon as I got home from work or weekends, it was just all about the game, all about the rating, all about maintaining that online. I stacked on a fucking heap of weight. I was very unhealthy. I don't even think I saw sunlight, literally, until I got up in the morning, drove in the car to work, and then got home. I was just obsessed about it. That's all I'd think about. I just maintained my lifestyle to get there. And then it dawned on me, this is not really important. It was fun, but I made it all-consuming and too important.
Did you sort of wean away from that, or did you just stop cold turkey?
Stop cold turkey.
I think you told me you snapped the disc.
Snapped the disc, deleted it from my computer, entirely walked away. I told everybody what I was going to do. They were in disbelief because I collected all this stuff in the game, things that you grind. It's like working, you know.
Yeah.
It's like
you had a whole other life.
Yeah. It's like grinding when you're building cash assets up and everything like that. It's very comparable to that. And I'm not saying to people, don't be financially successful and don't set yourself up. I'm not saying that at all. But what I am trying to say is when you kind of examine the timeline of everything, I mean, my dogs, they were aging during that time. I kind of realized I don't do anything on the outside of life anymore. Like I don't go and enjoy nice dinners. I don't speak to my wife or my friends or anything like that. Like I had just isolated everybody out of my life. I'm not saying I didn't enjoy it. I'm not saying that at all, but I'm saying that the addiction to it became extremely unhealthy. You know, there's a lot of people online advising people about some really unhealthy lifestyles. Like they're talking to people about like, you need to crush it in here. You need to do this. You need to double down on this. Okay, so what about your dogs? What about your family? What about the people who really love you and care about you and are supporting you and want to stand by you? What about those type of people? Even with the dogs, as I've shared over time, I also created unhealthy addictions to those sort of things as well. I became addicted to dogs where I was cutting people out as well. Mm-hmm. I don't know what shifts. I don't know what changes from person to person, but I kind of feel it's important to reanalyze and look at your life, look at the people around you, look at the people who are advising you, look at the people that you are spending a lot of your time with. I see things online from time to time where people have gotten out of a relationship with a person or a group of people and realized I didn't fully understand how complicated or how toxic these people were until I really analysed and did some self-perspective on what's actually going on here. It's not my business to tell anybody what to do with their life. All I can be is a guide on all the mistakes I've made and the realisations I've had myself over my timeline, the thing that I'm trying to highlight, which is most important. To flip this forward a little bit as well, the other realisation that I've had is the short time that we share space with our dogs. Some of that lives to fruition, like it goes to plan. It goes from puppyhood or rescuing at a young age until 10, 12, 14 years of age, if we're lucky. There are other timelines that get cut incredibly short. There's a bunch of people in my friends group this year who have lost their dogs recently. To note, Kat and Brent lost Mr. Smith, as we were talking about. They were prepared that something was imminent because of his health. Brent and I have discussed it, especially over this last year. His health had been declining just after Christmas. Sadly, they had to put Mr. Smith to sleep, which was crushing for them nonetheless. Those sort of things really awaken in me the vulnerabilities of what a timeline is. But one thing, while we're talking about the realization of it, there is also cause for celebration on timelines before, because there have been examples that I want to put forward how many of us in this industry, when we're talking about the dog training industry, we've got to extend people's time with their dogs. An example of that, some of the dangerous dogs that I've been dealing with this year, their timeline has looked like it was going to come to an end. However, because of the work that I've done and you have done and colleagues have done in the industry and around the world, we have extended time for these people. Like we have given them more time with their dogs. This whole thing came about because I got a really nice Christmas email from a client that just said to me, Glenn, you don't realize what you did for me and my family, how you have given us more time with the dogs. And I highlighted on that word time because I'm seeing that popping up in conversations with people. I'm running out of time. My dog is running out of time. Time is really the important issue for people. They just don't realize it. They don't sit with it enough to realize it's time. They are saying it in conversations all the time. as I'm saying right now. If you listen to the conversation with people, they talk about the importance of time without realizing how imperative it actually is, and everything that we do, the manifestations that we have all through our life. Getting that email really, like I said, it really woke something up in me, and I started thinking and reflecting back. We have done some incredible things with not only the timeline of dogs, but also people as well. You and I have received multiple messages, emails, calls, FaceTime, Zooms, whatever it is, where people have thought about ending their time. It's not to say that it was just you and I, but we have played a part in other people's lives where they realize I can do something better with my time, or I can reflect on the time that I have and not dwell on some of the old time, but start thinking about the new possibilities of new time. Mate, that happened to me in my life. There was a point in my timeline where I basically thought, I don't want to go forward anymore. I don't want to pursue this because I don't really believe that it's going to get better for me. There was a point in my timeline where I thought suicide was the answer, like ending it was the way to fix it. I was in pain for a long time and I thought, why not? I don't feel good about things. I don't have a positive outlook on life. I don't really believe that things could possibly get better. Why not end it here? But then the fortunate side for me was I got a second chance. I got a second chance to analyze the next stage of my lifetime. And things certainly looked up, things improved, things switched into a different type of perspective. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened for other people. I've seen and read of people whose time has been cut short either by illness or through mental health. That's happened a few times this year where I've seen people who I follow on Instagram or Facebook have posted that they've lost a friend. Recently, my very good friend he was almost like my brother growing up through my childhood, a guy called Darren Lawrence. He was somebody that most of my childhood life, I can't remember holidays or time where we weren't hanging out together and doing stupid, impetuous boy stuff all the time. Same age as me. He died suddenly in early December. He got an aneurysm, died suddenly. That happens. People depart. You had a high risk with your young son, Axel, when he was young, and things were a bit touch and go for a period of time there. That was a scary time for you. Nonetheless, it still kind of wakes you up sometimes. Sometimes you think about that and think, time really is such an important aspect. What are your thoughts?
Time is the truly non-renewable that we have, right? Like you get what you get, you don't get upset, right? That's it.
Well, we can't go backward in it yet.
Unless that's what our grey alien friends are here doing.
Like I'm seeing in physics that people are now saying it's no longer a physics issue, it's an engineering issue. So maybe one day we may get to go back in time. Have you seen the movie About Time? I'm sure I've talked about this before.
What happens in that one?
It's got Bill Nighy in it. His young son finds out that he can go into a closet, clench his hands and think about a time in life, and he can suddenly find himself back in that time, like he can reset. He sits with his dad, who's Bill Nighy. This is a UK film. And he sits with his dad and his dad goes, yeah, this is the thing about our family. We've always been able to travel back in time. Watch it.
I'll have to check it out.
It's a really fucking terrific movie. One of the things that will break your heart in about it is, I won't say what happens, but his father gets cancer and he realizes, well, this is it for me. And his son has the ability to go back and spend any time in his life with him up until a period of time where he can't.
Yeah.
And he has to either do that or accept what's happened and be able to move forward. It kind of puts him in a chair of being able to control his destiny one way or another, like he has a choice to make. And incredibly well written for a kind of a low budget time travel movie.
Yeah.
But it's comedic as well. It's a funny movie. It's terrific, but it's a fucking tearjerker when you kind of look at it. Like he's got this capability, but he's also got a choice to make.
I love a good time travel movie. I won't lie. I have issues with the time travel paradoxes. I kind of prescribe to the idea that if time travel were ever possible, it would always be possible, right? Because it has to be, surely. And that you probably can't change anything. If you could, you would have, and therefore it has. it gets very difficult to talk about. I was flying home from somewhere once, and it was a multi-day journey, and I was reading Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy at the time, and like talk about
great movie, great
but
book.
like I was flying through a lot of different time zones and reading that book at the same time. It was really messing with my time. But no, mate, I agree with everything you said. I think that life is about enjoying yourself. That's really all that there is to do. There's no point bogging yourself down in experiences and people that you don't enjoy. And it's not
100%.
about like unadulterated enjoyment. It's long-term enjoyment. But I think as well, in terms of what you were saying about having been in dark places, like I can appreciate that, but I can't feel it. Certainly I've had super stressful, terrible experiences, but almost all of them I now reflect on as being really good. Like that's a Stoic principle. But for me, and the biggest life-changing thing that happened to me was breaking my back, having to leave the army. And at the time, like I thought that was the worst thing that could possibly happen to me. Like I'm going to reflect on this as being, this is a huge life-changing event for me. I was a lifer. I'd still be in the army if that didn't happen. I had the rug pulled out from underneath me. But now when I look on it, I'm like, oh, that's the best thing that ever happened to me because I felt like I was happy, but I wasn't. I'd convinced myself that I was somebody that I wasn't in that job. I'm not sure if I've ever gone into detail like on the show, but I think it was 2006. I was part of a recovery operation in Timor and it was very short notice. I was eating breakfast and then all of a sudden someone got killed in the UN in Timor and my unit as well as SAS had to zoom over straight away and recover the UN compound. And so it happened very, very quickly. And as I was in that helicopter on the way over, and Jane didn't even know I was going, we flew from Darwin in a Black Hawk. It's a one-way trip. There's no way back, right? There's no fuel. There's only enough fuel to get there. We had to put the external fuel pods on to get there. And until the Navy got there with ships that we could refuel from, it was good luck, right? You guys have to go and provide security, recover the UN compound, provide security to the town of Dili until the rest of the army can get there. Good luck. And so like, cool, awesome, right? It's not like I was flying into some hot zone. It was a fucking street gangs. What actually happened historically was that they have a prime minister and a president in Timor and they're like loaded with corruption. And one had the control of the military and the other one had control of the police. And they kind of turned each other against each other and both fled. These fucking pussies. So there was no one keeping law in Dili. So it was just run by street gangs. And so these street gangs were just tearing the town apart. Like they're kids, they're 15-year-old kids, And they didn't even know what they did. They were just trashing everything like you'd imagine a bunch of kids would. But then they trashed part of the UN compound and killed someone. They couldn't have understood. They were just kids. You're like, you don't understand what you've done. You can't. You can trash all the local businesses. That's a very local problem, right? But when you storm a UN compound and kill someone in there, there's a big machine that gets fired up to come and recover that. And we were part of that big machine. But like I said, when I got there, it was a bunch of 15-year-old kids. It's not like we're banging it in. They were like, oh my God. But anyway, on the flight over, I remember looking around, seeing the guys in the helo that had kids and stuff and being like, who the fuck's picking up your kids? Like, how's this going to go down? Because my girlfriend at the time doesn't even know I'm going. We weren't allowed to talk about it, but I haven't told her. She's going to find out on the news that I'm here. I'm just not going to come home tonight, I remember making that decision like, oh, well, I can't have kids. And I didn't, I think that I always assumed that I would, but I didn't really have this like big drive to want them, but I just assumed that I would. And then I made that decision that day. I was like, oh, well, I can't do that. Like, there's no way I can do that because I can't be the kind of father that I want to be if I'm to be one and do this job. And I've dedicated myself entirely to this job. So this is what I'll be. And so now, in hindsight, I've got these two amazing little kids that I love with all my heart, and I can't imagine my life without them. And so being forced to leave the army put me in a position where I was like, well, this is the worst thing that's happened to me, right? Like, this is it. Like, my whole life, the rug's been pulled out from underneath me. I don't know, and we've spoken about this, like, I don't know who I am. I don't know how to be. I remember sort of explaining, like, I didn't even know what fucking kind of clothes I wore. You know what I mean? Because I would wear the thing that was for the thing, and so there was a real case of like, I don't know who the fuck I am. I'm that. I don't know what I am if I'm not that. And now I'm not allowed to be that anymore.
That's a really important question that you've got to ponder throughout your life. It ebbs and flows quite continually. Like, who am I? That's the question that I get hung on sometimes is know thyself. Know who you are. Be comfortable in your skin sometimes.
Yeah.
And also be aware that you're allowed to change.
Yeah, well, that's right. So like that was my issue was I was playing one particular character in the movie and then that character essentially didn't exist. He didn't get killed. He just got written out, but I'm still here. So I was like, oh, fuck. Like I have to become a different character. How do I do that? And it was not easy to do. But now when I reflect on it, I'm like, oh, that was the best. That was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Well, you've revealed on multiple occasions that you were destroyed as a person and recreated in the image of what the army wanted.
That's what happens to everybody. That's what happens. Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying is that there's no wonder that when you leave that you're confused about who you are because you've been destroyed.
Yeah, that's right.
Like you've been broken down.
You don't exist anymore. You don't exist anymore.
Yeah, that's right.
That's what happens. Like that can seem like a bit of a overstatement, but that's what happens in armies, right? Like that's why when you turn up, when you join an army, it doesn't matter which one. They're all the same all around the world. There's degrees to this stuff. It's not like the Foreign Legion where they take your name. They literally take your identity off of you completely. But most armies, you turn up on the first day, they take everything off of you. They give you a uniform and varied degrees of that. So like what happens in the Australian Army, when you go to Kapuka, which is where the basic training happens, the moment you arrive, they haven't taught you how to wear a uniform or anything like that, but they take everything off of you and they give you this tracksuit to wear. It's like a prison tracksuit. It's just a green army tracksuit because they haven't taught you how to wear an army uniform yet and taught you the significance of it, but they have to put you in something that is the same as everybody else. And then the day you arrive, they put you in that tracksuit, they take everything off you, and the next day they shave your head. And so anything that was you is not you anymore, right? And they ritualistically shave your head as well, right? So even if you're bald, you still sit down in the fucking chair and they run the clippers over the top, right? So like, I don't know if that's to the skin bald, but even guys who already had the number 2 buzz cut and got it in anticipation of going, got put in the chair and number 2 buzz cut over the top because you're going through the process. It's a ritualization, right? And so they strip you of everything that you are. Any sort of individualness that you have is taken, and then they go, okay, but now this is who you are. And they slowly give you back that individualness. Like you're allowed to sort of hold on to parts of it. And even though like I was never a hardcore army indoctrination guy, like I did all that and I went to the School of Infantry, but then I was straight into SF, and it's somewhat different there. And also the hyper niche role that I kind of did in there also allowed me not to have to operate as an army man all the time. In fact, it required the opposite of me, but I was, you know, like, and I was that character. I was being that guy. I was that operator. Like, it's all fine. You know, we've been through this before. That's a long time ago, but I thought I was very happy doing that. And I guess happiness is subjective because like, if you feel like you are, then you are. So I was happy. But now, man, I couldn't imagine it. I could not fucking imagine it. And the real highlight of that for me was most of my peers are out of the army now, like most, not all. And a couple of years ago, it was right in the height of that Brereton report coming out and the war crimes investigations and all that kind of stuff and the shit that was coming of that. And it was at a time where for people, you know, if you're not in Australia, a lot of people in Australia probably don't know as well, but the chief of the army, who was the chief of the army as I was leaving, basically fucking tried to destroy the army on his way out and politicized everything in order to make himself a politician. He was awarded the Australian of the Year. It's one of the few times that I've signed a petition and shared it to have him stripped of that, which he wasn't. Because I was like, this guy actually did terrible things to Australia. He did not do anything to help us out. He made himself look good, and he did a fucking very, very good job of that, but didn't do a good job of setting the army for success. But he was out. By the time that house of cards crumbled, it couldn't be pinned to him, but even though we all knew that was what was happening.
And that's public knowledge?
Oh, yeah. And so where am I going with this is that I thought I was really happy in this position, and I missed it still, right? And then it was a few years later and it's all crumbling and they're accusing us of being war criminals and all this kind of stuff. And like, it was really bad. And a really close friend of mine who was in a pretty high position of authority, and it would have been exactly where I was, right? We were peers. We were promoted at the same time all the time. I would have been in the exact same position he was, but in charge of different guys. We're drinking one night and like it was a big catch up and it's late in the evening, and he, you know, has a bit of a breakdown about how fucked it all is and that how morale is so low in his crew of guys and there's nothing he can do about it. And he's upset because he can't protect them from all the bullshit that's coming their way. And that a lot of these newer guys had never even deployed and they're getting all of the punishments that were for other people and blah, blah, blah. He was really in bad shape over it. And I remember thinking, I want to feel bad for you, man. I want to, but I just feel really happy that I'm not you. Like that's all I could actually feel in that moment was relief that it's not me. So all of that is a very long way of saying that what felt to me like the worst experience, and for sure at that time, was hyper stressful, man. Like it was not only like a reinvention of the self, but also like, how am I going to live? You know, the army does eventually look after you, but I don't know if I've ever explained it on the show. Like Veterans Affairs really fucked me over. It took me 2 years and 10 months for them to even accept that I had broken my back as a result of being in the army.
Well, you and I had multiple talks about that, and I couldn't believe how
they
spat out the end you were.
Mate, they fucked me in ways that I can't even begin to describe. And when it eventually goes to the hearing, the people at the hearing actually apologized to me. They were like, we cannot believe that you've been through this shit and that we should never have met. Like me and you should never have met. You shouldn't have had to appeal to get to this point. Your case is so clear that this should have been accepted the day you put the form in. And like, we should never have been through this. So that was a super stressful kind of thing to have to go through that. And not for nothing more than to be covered medically. That's all I wanted was to be covered medically after I would leave the army. Because while you're in, you're fine. But then once you're out, you're on your own, right? Unless you get these conditions accepted. And they tried to tell me that I had a developmental fracture and that I'd had the fracture since I was probably 14 years old, despite in 2003, I had a pretty significant parachute malfunction and had a like pretty hard landing and got a back x-ray that day, no fracture. So it was like, no, like I definitely didn't do this. I've got the x-ray and I submitted that with part of the thing. Like this is an x-ray you guys did to me in 2003 showing no fracture. And here's one 2011 with a fracture. Like it can't be any clearer than that, right? Anyway, I carry on. It was the worst time in my life, but it might actually, on reflection, have been the best thing that ever happened to me.
Well, isn't that amazing as a flip around?
Yeah.
When you kind of analyze where you are, because you and I have shared a very similar kind of story with different sort of outcomes, but I too was at that pinnacle where I thought I'm in the worst time of my life. I can't see things getting better, but things got fantastic on the other side of things.
Totally.
You know, like I couldn't have been happier with the other born again side of my life. You know, the time when it flipped on its head and it changed. And all I'm saying to people, there's a lot of people that I've spoken to in time, and some people have gone through with their intent, which is very unfortunate because some of these people were amazing people. You know, like I've met people and known people and shared a timeline with people. You may have as well. People out there may have, or people out there may be having those dark thoughts. All I'm saying is that there is light at the end of the tunnel. Sometimes you can't see it. Sometimes, as I've said to people before, sometimes it's not the direction you're walking in. Sometimes you have to backtrack and you have to go out the other way and realize that that is part of the light, you know, like stepping back, taking a perspective of it's not always pushing forward. It's sometimes backtracking as well.
Yeah, exactly.
And for me, it was, you know, there was a bit of backtracking that I had to do. There was a bit of re-examining. And that doesn't mean that I don't get alone with my thoughts sometimes and pretty fucked up or despondent about things or a bit woe is me. I can have those moments, but nowhere near what I used to have, to the point where I just thought this is fucking disaster. This is the end. There is no more. I'm worthless and no one really cares. It wasn't just my stepfather who did this. There were a lot of people who played a role in making that happen. One of them was my grandmother, who loved me incredibly. Like, she was very supportive of me, but she was incredibly fucking militant Christian with me all the time and gave me some pretty bleak outviews. Like, if you don't do this, you are going to hell. If you say this, you are going to hell. Like, she was giving me a direction and a pathway. Like, unless I behaved in this completely virtuous manner the majority of my life, I was going to hell. And she was telling me that when I was a little kid. You know,
the fucking weaponization of religion is.
But see, people who have good intent don't realize the damage that they can actually do with it sometimes. Is instead of painting out the picture of the worthiness of belonging to a religion and having collaboration, fellowship and sharing in love and being a person of good virtue, there's this punishment side of it that I just basically kept thinking of and drawing on. Well, I'm going to hell. There's no way I can avoid doing this. Like, it's going to happen. I'm not good enough to go to heaven. I'm going to go to hell. Some people, they pretty much believe, well, I'm in hell, so I might as well fucking go there. You know, like, that's how it should be. Then I started to reflect on a few things. These are kind of some messages that I want to give to people. Obviously, people who don't listen to this, who will never hear this because they're not part of a dogscape. But there has to be a time in your life where you come to a conclusion that you are worthy. and you are enough. There are a couple of things that people have lots of struggles with. They don't believe they're worthy and they don't believe that they're enough or that they've got enough. That's a really sad contemplation and a very difficult position to be in when you don't feel worthy and you don't feel like you're enough or you've got enough. Again, when we get people who are talking about getting out there and fucking crushing it and stuff like that, there's not many really wealthy people that I know of who are good people. Like, just because they've got money, it doesn't mean they're important and it doesn't mean they're great or that they're better than you. Some of these people are some of the most miserable sons of bitches that you could ever meet in your life. And they're addicted to more. They don't know what enough is. They don't have the capability of understanding that. And they make you feel small and they make you feel insignificant and they make you feel like you're worthless and that you're not enough because they keep telling you you're not good enough until you've crushed it, until you've made X millions of dollars or you've got a Bentley or you've got this and that. Those things are fun. Those things are terrific. But some of the happiest people I've ever met in my life are people who aren't crushing it. They haven't got multiples of millions in their bank. They've got fucking good friends around them. They've got family. They go away on holidays. They go camping. They do things that are within the budget of what they got, but they're fucking happy people too. I recall, and I know, I'm sure I told this story of seeing little kids in a Fijian camp kicking a Coke bottle around on the floor, screaming and laughing, and the parents playing with them and running to their parents and getting swept up in their mum or dad's arms and tickled and kissed and held upside down and stuff like that. And I looked at that and I thought, that's the fucking secret right there. Being in those moments where you're with people that, it doesn't have to be your mum and dad, it can be your friends, or it's about people that you love. We've just gone through Christmas, and Christmas really, those times of years, it's not about presents and stuff like that. It's about being with the people who are most important to you and the people who really love you. That's what I came to recognize, is that I've got some fucking good people around me. I've got people who care about me, who love me unconditionally. Like, I can be a bit of a or I can be a great person and they'll still love me. They'll still forgive me. When you look around and you see the people in your relationships or your landscape and you realize, fucking hell, how lucky am I to have those type of friends, those type of families, and those type of dogs in my life, that I feel worthy and loved and I feel enough.
That's heavy. All right. I want to now talk about next year.
You got a plan for next year?
Well, I want to pump everyone up a little bit.
Yeah.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, why not?
No, so I want to talk about something. So 2 years ago, I started Bullet Journal, right? It was a productivity thing for me.
You still doing it?
Every day, right? And I've changed it probably a little bit over 6 months ago. I went digital for a few different reasons, but I've always been a notebook guy, because when I was in the army, you can't take electronic devices anywhere. So like I was always carrying a notebook. It's one of the things that every AJ does, or every soldier does. And so when I started the Bullet Journal, I went fully in the notebook. Bullet journaling, you can look it up. It's a productivity hack. It's an ADD people thing. And, I've never been, I don't have ADD. I'm definitely not diagnosed with ADD or autism. However, the more and more of my friends
have
that
you asked to be analysed for
No,
it?
I haven't. I don't need to kick over that stone and find out what's underneath. However, it turns out that a lot of the non-medical, like the non-pharmaceutical treatments for ADD, I do. And so perhaps I've been self-medicating that way for a really long time. I definitely have the ability to hyperfixate. I definitely have the ability to not listen because I'm not interested in something. And so the bullet journal method it's actually a productivity method, but it's based around for people with ADD. It's definitely worth checking out. I know since I've been talking about it on the show, a lot of people have reached out to me about it, and I travel around and talk to people about it all the time. And the beauty of the bullet journal is very adaptable. So I've been religiously doing it for the last 2 years. I do it every single day. Now there's days where I don't do much. There's some days where I write a heading down and kind of get on with it. There's some blank spaces in my bullet journal where I've traveled and days don't exist, but I even have just written in that space that I've traveled, Like for people who are unaware, when you say come to Australia from the US, if you leave on a Tuesday night, you will arrive on Thursday morning. Wednesday does not exist to you, right? So you get an empty space in your bullet journal where I write, I was on a plane. That's how a bullet journal works, is you kind of play with these different spreads. And so the spreads are you make your own pages and you put whatever you want into the pages. There's a method of how you migrate the tasks through, But you sort of track whatever you want to track, and you sort of keep logs of anything you want to log. And the beauty of the bullet journal, as I do it, is that one of the key principles of it is that it fucking works for you. You don't work for it. And so when it becomes laborious or there's parts that you don't enjoy and there's no outcome from them, like I have a lot of different trackers, and my trackers of, just my own health, well-being, but medications and my dog's meds and all that kind of stuff. It's all in my bullet journal when I've got to do all these different things. And those things change all the time, because I kind of realized at one point, like, what do I give a fuck about this? Why am I tracking it? Right. But now I know, because I have tracked it and I've looked at the data, and now I know I don't give a fuck about that data. Like, as an example would be like recovery score off of my Apple Watch or Whoop Band, right? Like I started, I would track that. I would write that down. A lot of the things that I track within my bullet journal are within apps, but just the process of writing it into my bullet journal means that I go into the app and I pay attention to the data rather than just having it and not really looking at it. One of the things I got rid of was recovery score, because I was like, this doesn't reflect my felt experience. I don't give a shit about this. I'm not writing it down anymore. All right. So you have to be adaptable like that. One of the things that's sort of been enduring for me is I do a daily log, but then I also do like a gratitude page each week. So on a Sunday, normally, sometimes it can take me till Tuesday to get it done, I would just write for a page, and I force myself to write in language of gratitude, where I can only write about good things that have happened and how thankful I am for them having happened. And I force myself not to ever put in spite of this, I found happiness there. Like, I just leave out anything negative and it's just positive writing. That in itself is a pretty good exercise to do that I've enjoyed doing. It's not easy sometimes it's fucking hard, but it's a big step in reframing your thoughts on your week and how you reflect on things, and you can really point your attention at things that went well rather than pointing your attention at things that went poorly. And I think there's a lot of value in doing that. Other things that I've sort of played with in the bullet journal is, various mood trackers and all that kind of stuff. And they come and go, right? Like, all these things kind of come and go. What I started out doing as well was then I started, because I've journaled periodically through my life, and every time you sort of get into the mental health space and productivity space, and if you get into the sort of tech bro area, right, the continual thing throughout is journaling, right? And we talk about all the time, you read Meditations, Marcus Aurelius's book. It was never a book. He didn't mean to write that for anyone to read. It was just his journal. So there his like own thoughts into there. And it's interesting to see, this is a man who was the most powerful human being on the planet, and seeing his internal struggles with getting out of bed one day, like there's an incredible passage. I can't remember the exact line of it. I could look it up and I could post it if people care, but there's this incredible passage where he's having a bit of an argument with himself about getting out of bed. And he sort of convinces himself to do it because he's like, it's just because it's cold, right? It's not because he's in some like existential crisis.
Yeah, I've read the book.
He just can't be fucked.
Yeah.
And he has this dialogue with himself about like, is your purpose to be comfortable in bed, or is your purpose to do the fucking job that you have, right? Like, what do you want to do? Because you can do anything you want, right? You are the most powerful human being on the planet. Anything you want, you can do. Do you really want to stay in bed? When you think about that this afternoon, will you be happy that you did that, So like, there's a lot of interesting sort of things. He wasn't preaching. He's writing to himself. Like, he's writing that down.
It's that internal dialogue that's in your head.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know a human being, and this is probably why some people struggle with their thoughts sometimes, is because there is a voice in your head that is talking to you.
Well, this is what we're about to go to, right?
Yeah, cool.
So as I've sort of played with the way that I journal, I've ended up landing at the moment on this thing that I've been doing for more than 6 months. It's been the majority of this year I've been doing it. And so I divide my page now because I changed to the iPad. It's a lot easier. I've got kind of an infinite screen now instead of being restricted by my A5 page. And so what I would do was, at the end of the day, I would do this kind of day's reflection. And what I found with the day's reflection was I was actually being really hard on myself, because like, that's how my brain kind of works. And I think most people's brains work that way, is you kind of look for the things that you didn't do well. Because if I'm reflecting on the day, what's the point in reflecting on how well it went? The good things went good. I constantly find myself reflecting on the things I didn't do well.
Mate, negativity is a gravity well.
That's right. But it's a really strong motivator. And I have a habit of using that dark force motivation, right? So like fear is the greatest motivator, and I am very able to manipulate myself into being afraid of something so that I'm motivated away from it. And if that's what you need to do, that's what you need to do. And I'm careful when I do that, because it can be very difficult to get yourself out of that loop. And that's a trick that I learned a long time ago when I was in the army. And it's a trait of myself that I'm very careful to expose, because I sometimes don't like myself when I get like that. Depends on where I point it. It's why I've talked about it, like one of my closest friends, Matt, we did that MEP challenge, and it actually got pretty dark, right? Like where in order to truly beat someone, I have to kind of want to destroy them. And I won the MEP challenge. I damaged myself badly along the way. It was very unhealthy for both of us. He has a tattoo that will remind him for the rest of his life that I beat him, because that was the challenge. You had to get tattooed on you, out MEP'd, right?
Isn't it incredible for most of us that the pursuit of a goal can come at all costs sometimes?
Yeah. Well, because it was against another person, not with another person, the greatest motivator had to be a hatred of that person. Like, because there's nothing more powerful than that, right? Maybe you could talk about the love of a person, and that's why when you do things together, you can achieve incredible things. But if I'm against a person, I have to turn against it to the point, like, I know you know this, but for people that don't know, the MEPS it's just points off of your heart rate, right? That's all it is, right? He actually called it quits 3 days out. He was like, mathematically, I can't beat you. Like, there's no way in the time that I have available to do these workouts. And even if I leave my monitor on for the entire time, mathematically, I can't catch you, right? Even if I'm in the highest band of things. So he 3 days out called it. It's like, you win. I ran hill sprints till fucking midnight the night it ended. And I even said to him, that sounds exactly like somebody who's going to fucking trick me would fucking say, right? Because what you could do was you could put your phone in, you could disconnect your device from your phone, and it would store all those heartbeats in the device, and then you could reconnect the device and it would shoot up, right? And so I was like, that's what I would say if I were behind. That's how I would trick you into lulling you into a false sense of security. So I was like, no retreat, no surrender. I have to keep going. So that dark energy is something that you can call on if you need to, but it's definitely not where I find that I'm comfortable all the time, right?
You've got to analyze the cost.
Yes.
You've got to analyze how it poisons your soul sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
For a very long period of my life, comes from the show Dexter, where he talks about having a dark passenger. You know, like I had an advisor that was fucking fueling my rage, you know, like I could hear that person. Sometimes the volume was fucking intense in my head of that passenger telling me, you know, like, you have to do this. You have to take vengeance. You have to be that wrath. Because I was an angry person and so deeply hurting all the time, I kind of felt like I need other people to know what this feels like. And when you're going to get it, you're really going to get it. Like, you're going to experience every fucking pore in my body that's hurting. You're going to know what I feel like when I feel like this.
Yeah.
You become elemental and dangerous when you're like that. You're unpredictable and you're out of control.
Yeah.
You feel like you're in control. This is why it's addictive to be around people like that sometimes, because you feel like they give you control of things that you're not in control of. You were talking about the anti to that of love being a more powerful thing. And most cultures around the world, most people that are worth considering their teachings or their message, they talk about love being the most powerful of all.
Well, it's
of
non-destructive. That's so like hate as a motivator is incredible, but it's destructive. So it eventually destroys itself, whereas love doesn't do that.
Yeah.
I got to carry on. So I was doing these daily reviews and they got a little bit negative. So then I started trying to do these like morning manifestation things, and it was just too woo for me. What you're meant to do if you're going to journal about the coming day, and I was looking, you know, because I'm an extremist, I was trying to find the opposite of what I was doing. So I was essentially writing these kind of like manifestation passages where you sort of write about how your day went in the past tense when it hasn't happened yet. And the idea is you're sort of like priming yourself to feel that particular way. I struggled with that. It didn't work for me. But then I ended up adapting that and landing on what I've been doing for, it's got to be at least, I could tell you exactly how long it is. If I went back through the books, I could tell you exactly how long it is. But it's probably, 8 to 10 months, something like that. Where what I do each morning, because there's 7 days in the week and there's 7 Hermetic principles, is I just write a passage about my adaptation of each one and how I plan to think or live that day with it at front of mind and how I'm going to be aware of that principle each day. And by writing that down, I do that every day. I do that every morning. It's not that I have like a specific time, but I try to get it done before like my work day begins. If that means I get up and manage to get it done, like first thing in the morning for me is always I deal with the dogs, right? So I get up and the dogs have to be dealt with in whatever is happening with them, whether that's going to do stuff or just letting them out, whatever we're at. And then sometimes I get this little window for myself before the kids wake up. Other times not. Maybe they're already awake. And so then I've got to wait till they go to school or whatever. But like in the morning, sometime in the morning, not necessarily first thing, but sometimes in the morning, I write this passage on Hermetic principles. And so what I want to do very quickly is sort of go through them briefly and sort of talk about how they relate to the life of a dog trainer.
Go ahead.
What I would encourage everybody to do is like, don't take my word for any of this shit because I'm a dummy and just some dickhead with a microphone, but have a look through this. There's lots of different places you look at it. Get onto YouTube and type in Hermetic principles. There'll be plenty of videos that will come up. And if you want to get into the real sort of like it's probably better that I don't talk about the history of the Hermetic principles so that nobody has a bias against why they wouldn't, because there's a wild story on Hermes Trismegistus, who they are attributed to. It's so fantastical that it's one of those things you better off it's a great message. Don't get too deep into it. Unless like me, you're willing to accept some fucking madness, right? Yeah. But so the first principle is mentalism, right? The way it works is there's 7 principles. There's the principle itself. Then there's kind of a catch cry that goes along with it. And then there's the idea of it. So what I do is I write down the top of my page. On every Monday, I write down mentalism. And then the next thing that I write after that is all is mind. And the principle of mentalism is that nothing is real, right? Like whether we're in a simulation, which we are, or not, it doesn't matter. The idea is that your sense organs are providing the data to your brain that renders the world in real time. And what you're rendering is made for you specifically. It's made for you and by you, and it's not accurate, right?
That's an interesting thing to say. Sorry to interrupt you on
your
flow, but that's an interesting thing to say because if you look at standard life and what you interpret, and then when you're intoxicated either through alcohol or, drugs, illicit or prescription, your complete imagery on the world can be unbelievably altered.
Yeah.
Unbelievably.
Yeah. And so the objective reality, we don't have to get into the too ethereal kind of things on whether anything really exists, but what it looks like, what it feels like, how it interacts with you is completely from your perception only. That's the only thing you can actually have. Now, you can try and look at things from other people's perception, but you can't actually do that, right? Like you can try really hard, but for most of us, the mortals among us, you are only aware of what you're aware of. The moment you start to infer what somebody else thinks about something, you are superimposing how you might think about that particular thing if you were in their circumstances. But you don't know what got them to that circumstances.
Yeah, that's exactly
right. So we don't understand others really at all, right? Because my interactions with you, like take you and me, for example, right? For what are we at? 8 years now of sitting here, at least 7 years sitting here,
like
300 and something episodes. We've got at least 1,000 hours sitting at this desk talking to each other, right? Plus all of our other interactions. But you have a whole, and I know a lot about you, but you have 40 years of life and experience that I wasn't around for. Not only wasn't around for, but I wasn't aware that you existed. And so your entire history that you have told me about, I can only know what you have told me about.
Exactly.
I can't know the whole
travel
thing.
That path, yeah.
No, and I can sympathize with you. I can attempt to empathize with you, but I can't know it, right? I can only know how I would feel given the information that you have given to me about your situation. But that surely is not all of it because you can't even pass on all that information because
some of it I've forgotten about.
Exactly. And some of it you would like intentionally not, and others you would unintentionally not. Like you protect yourself by forgetting, right?
Yep.
The idea of mentalism is that you create the world that you're in and you render it however you want to render it. With any form of thoughts that you have, you've got to sort of be quite careful about, are these my thoughts? Or am I sort of like imposing my ideas onto other people? I'm positive that you've had conversations like this where people go, hey, like, what's going on? Are we all right? And you're like, what do you mean? They're like, well, you're acting weird towards me. And you're like, nah, I am acting weird because of something else that's going on in my life. It has nothing to do with you whatsoever, but there's layers to my existence. You're at one layer of it, and the interference with other layers will affect this one, but it's got nothing to do with you.
Well, that's the expectation of behavior.
Yeah, but
like
if you don't have that conversation, we separate and you go, oh, fucking, what's up with Pat? He hates me. It must have been because I did these things to him. And therefore, then you're like, oh, well, Pat doesn't like me because I've done these things. He's found out about it. You're like, whatever it is, you start to infer because you can't know what you haven't been told, and you can't even know what you've been told is the truth, because it's probably not, because the truth and reality, they're not necessarily the same thing, right?
To paint that in a picture that people could probably have a visual summary of, reminds me of that meme where there's a girl in bed facing one direction and a guy in bed facing another direction. And she's thinking, my boyfriend won't talk to me, he hates me, blah, blah, blah. And she's going through all these negative thoughts. And he's thinking, oh, I hope it doesn't rain tomorrow so I can go motorbike riding.
Exactly.
And that can be changed to anybody's perspective on anything. But
100%.
That's an incredible way of painting a picture out, because you're right, 100%. Like, I sometimes have a belief of a baseline of how people should behave around me, or an expectation of their behavior based on the baseline of history. When that alters, when the person isn't doing it, you're thinking, well, what's wrong with you? Why are you doing this? And we do this with our dogs as well. To turn it back onto dogs, we kind of think, why are you behaving like this? What has happened? But we're unaware of what happened. For people whose dogs are freaked out by thunderstorms or fireworks or something like that, and you come home and the dog has ripped the place apart, you're thinking, why did you do this? Why did you behave like that? But they weren't aware something triggered this, and then the dog was led to a different form of behavior other than its baseline.
The big way I do relate the principle of mentalism to dog training is exactly as you said, trying to take the dog's perspective on things.
Yeah.
And one of the things that really blew my mind was watching my neighbor. He was probably, he might have been 3 or 4 at the time. It was over just bubbles, right? It was just bubbles. A new bubble gun got brought out and it sprayed a bunch of bubbles, and he was visibly shaking with excitement and screaming. And I remember I looked at him and I thought, I can't remember the last time I felt like that about anything. Like, imagine the last time that you were so happy in the moment, right, that your hands started fucking shaking and you just started screaming in pure joy, right? And I watched him do that and I was like, wow, I can't remember. Like, surely I have, but I don't remember ever having done that. And then I looked at Valerie doing the same fucking thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, in the moment, my now 11-year-old dog just blissed out chasing the bubbles.
How old was your neighbor?
3 or 4.
Oh, right. Like okay.
He's just a kid, right?
Yeah.
And as I'm watching her, I thought to myself, she's experiencing something similar to what this kid is. Like, it's just pure bliss. She's 100% in the moment and having the time of her life. She's vibrating, but she does that pretty regularly. You know, the like excited scream bark that she can do where she's just losing her mind in excitement. She does that when she's chasing rabbits and shit.
Yeah,
like
prey drive.
It just like it just falls out of her while she's doing that while she's chasing bubbles around, snatching them out of the sky. And I remember thinking, no, I know that in dogs. That's just really high drive, right? Like, that's just really high drive. That dog really just wants that. But then I look and I see, oh, hang on, this is the same as this kid and he's like blissed out. And it gave me cause to sort of think like, oh my God, when you are trying to redirect a dog away from, like it's a dog high in prey, it can be a working dog if we want to talk in those terms, or it can be a pet dog if we want to talk in those terms, right? Like, when that dog wants to chase the rabbit and you're going like, no, you have to walk on the loose leash. Can you imagine saying to that 3-year-old, like, no, don't get so excited about this. Come inside. You've got to sit on the fucking couch, right? That's not going to go well. Now, of course, there's times where the dog has to be managed. The dog has to be maintained. You can't allow the dog to be pulling and screaming in that level of prey. But it gave me this cause to think like, oh, I didn't realize those are feelings. That thing that's driving this behavior, because we as dog trainers just look at, the behavior has to go. But we look at it, we go, Oh my God. Imagine the feelings you would have to have, the emotions you would have to be having to drive that fucking behavior where you start to vibrate and scream, right?
I can flip that for you, mate, and talk about how many times as children were we told not to behave like that because that's not how you behave as growing up. Like you shouldn't feel that level of joy because it's reflecting in your behavior and it's embarrassing me.
Yeah, exactly. It gave me cause, and that's one of the things that I think about when I think about the principle of mentalism, when I think that you're rendering the world in your mind, right? And it's from your perspective. Everybody's individual world is created perfectly for them and by them.
Yep.
It's very easy to get stuck into your own thought patterns that are completely wrong and untrue. You can infer something on somebody and then you'll continually find evidence to make you think that that's true, even though it potentially is not. A lot of the times we find ways to be really mean to ourselves via the inference of others. Like when you think somebody doesn't like you and you come up with all these reasons as to why they don't like you, what you're actually doing is creating a fictional version of them so that you can be mean to yourself as somebody else. That's what you're actually doing, right? Like you're just outsourcing your own negative self-talk to somebody else.
Yeah, you're continuing the show at home.
Yeah. So the principle of mentalism in terms of people means you can choose your thoughts, right? You aren't necessarily in control of them, but you are the awareness of them. And you can be like, hey, that's not true. You can rationalize your way out of that kind of thing. But in terms of dog training, I look at it and I go, okay, I need to feel what you feel for a moment, or at least empathize with a dog about, like, because I can never feel. I don't have that prey drive, right? That's not going to happen. But I can be like, hey, for me to display that kind of behavior, my emotional dial has been fucking spun a long way, and I'm going to at least respect that of you. Maybe we have to change it. Maybe we can manipulate it. Maybe we can point it. Maybe I do have to cut it off because it's dangerous in this moment. Like, it's not to say that, oh, well, I just have to leave it and respect it and leave it alone. But I have to.
Well, there are groups who do that.
Yeah, and they're fucking idiots, right? And they're not creating safe environments. You know?
Exactly.
And so what I then do is I at least am going to approach it with the respect that it deserves. Now, I still might have to interfere with it, or I can, maybe I'm going to cultivate it, point it in a different way, but I can at least be like, okay, let me try and create your world in my mind, which is impossible, but let me try my best so that I can be respectful of how we change this with you. So that's a principle of mentalism.
Again, to draw a comparison on that, I know how much joy, unsolicited joy, I feel when I accelerate into dangerous levels in my motorbike. Not saying that I break the speed limit or anything like that.
Never, sir.
For me, that is transcendent.
Yeah.
Like I feel something I normally don't feel, like the adrenaline rush. All of these huge feelings are surging through me when I'm on my bike and I'm pushing myself, especially through twisties and so forth. To put it in perspective of dog training, like if nobody ever curbed that, there's tons of evidence for it where motorcyclists or people who are enthusiasts with high-powered cars have gone headfirst into a tree or into another person coming in the opposite direction or pulling out of their driveway. There does have to be checks and balances in it. We can't just go into a world where you just say, do what you want. Like your pursuit of bliss and happiness, it's consequence-free.
Yeah.
That's not entirely true. I do enjoy the feeling I get, but I also have a picture of perspective, as I do for my dogs and for the staff that work in the business or the friends that I have, is that we still have to have a perspective of consideration for those around us as well on how to live a life. I don't want to rob people of joy. I don't want to rob my dogs of joy, but I also don't want to shorten their time. Like I started talking about time, and those sort of things can fucking end your time. That can be a quick end in time. My time could come to an abrupt end on my motorcycle if I just get fucking too wild on it. And there have been days where I've got red mist and I've been in perilous situations and I thought, scale it back, my friend. Like you're now becoming too addicted to the fucking adrenaline on it. You need to pull back on it. Or I've watched my dog do something, as you have, and I've thought, nope, that can't continue, or else the next thing that's going to happen is I'm going to be putting you in a fucking 6-foot grave. The pursuit of joy is fantastic, but also layering in perspective as well.
Yeah. All right. Second Hermetic principle is correspondence.
Yep.
So every Tuesday I sit down and write about correspondence. Correspondence is, well, the catch cry that follows that, and people will have heard this, is as above, so below.
Yep.
Right? When I first started looking into this stuff, I was like, oh, I know that. And then the more that you sort of get into this, the more you'll see that. Now, they say these Hermetic principles are like the laws that govern the universe. You don't need to get ethereal or spiritual to get that. Like, we can explain it here in very concrete terms. And what we say of correspondence, as above, so below, is that everything is just repeating patterns at different scales. And we observe that, right? So when I write that down, I kind of think about in terms of everything is just repeating patterns over and over. Why don't I choose one of the scales at which I can exert my influence and have that turn into what I want it to turn into, and then hope and help manipulate the rest of the scale to follow along. So, and this is the classic line that like, clean up your room. Don't try and fix the whole fucking world. Just clean up your room and then let that be the microcosm of when you get that good at that, now you can move to a bit bigger, right? And move to a bit bigger and move to a bit bigger because everything repeats. And if you want to understand the system of the big, which is too big and complicated for you, understand the system of something small, right? And then go a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger. And by understanding the way things work at the micro level, that will assist you massively in understanding the way things work at the macro level.
Hang on, sir. Are you talking about shaping and chaining?
Isn't that exactly?
It's exactly what it is.
Isn't that dog training?
Yeah.
So like that's the main one of correspondence is the probably the most important in dog training terms. If like just get good at the little things. It's the basics, right? Get good at that because that will allow you to be good at the next.
Well, there's no way of comprehension of something at a macro level if you don't understand it at a micro level. You cannot physically understand how it unfolds or how it pieces together if you don't understand the micro.
Yeah.
There's multiple things that I've done in my life, like even though it hasn't happened yet, the discussion of flying a helicopter. I have not been in the cockpit of a helicopter. I have not been in control of trying to get one off of the ground. I know it in theory, like I studied it online. I spent an insane amount of hours understanding the mechanics of it, understanding how the engine works, understanding what fuel it needs to have, understanding all of the different devices where your feet need to go, what one hand needs to do, how to like analyze the cockpit, but I've never been in one. And until I'm in one, I will never understand what needs to happen because everybody who gets in one fucking shakes that thing all over the place. And unless they've got someone sitting there who's experienced and is at a macro level while you're trying to figure out I'm deeply in a micro level, but coming to terms with that, and then understanding I'm in an incremental learning phase right now and I've got to just be at peace with this. Day one, hour one, minute one, this is what we're doing in this given moment right now. And I can't comprehend any more than that because I don't understand it. I don't have the physical input in my brain. My brain hasn't comprehended it yet.
Yeah. So the principle of correspondence, as above, so below, everything is a repeating pattern just at different sizes. And when you choose the scale that you can understand it as well as you can, and that will help you understand the other scales above and below it.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to keep moving. The next Hermetic principle is vibration. Nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. When we talk about that, this is where we start to get into a little bit of the woo, right?
Nikola Tesla said, if you want to understand the universe, think of vibration and frequency.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. When we talk in terms of vibration, one of the weird things that sort of within our language, we lose a lot of the original sense of things. So, when people are like, oh, it's a good vibe. Well, like what you're saying is that the vibration in the space aligns with my own. If you want to get scientific with it, because I can't just accept the woo of any of this stuff, you should look up cymatics and have a look at the visualization of sound. And that is incredible, where you look at the way that you can create vibration on a board and with sand on the board.
Oh, that's incredible. Yeah. That's absolutely incredible.
Yeah. So cymatics is the visual representation of sound. It's definitely a rabbit hole that's worth going down. But what it means is that what is evident in that, everything vibrates all the time. We know that's a scientific, that's the way that the nucleus works. But the vibrations at which you vibrate at will cause different thought patterns. It will cause different behaviors, and it will cause attraction and repulsion from different things. And so what they say is that higher frequencies are, higher vibrations are better feelings, better states. It's, that love and gratitude and all those are at the very highest end of the spectrum. Hate and what else?
Malice.
And jealousy and those kind of things are low vibration things. When you don't get along with someone, very often what that is that you guys are at different vibrations. Now, when I learned about the principle of vibration, it immediately was the confirmation and reaffirmation for me that when I don't jive with someone, or when somebody, when the old saying, like when somebody tells you who they are, you should believe them, that to me was really the key part of vibration where I was like, I just can't be around you. And what I do now is when I don't gel with people anymore, I just leave. I just cut and run.
It's the best thing to do.
Yeah. And like, I don't hold any ill will. I mean, it's hard to say that. That's probably not true, right? Because you've had experience with people. It's hard to let go of that. I try really hard to. But what I do is I just bounce. Because if you're not vibrating at the same rate as somebody else, and so vibrating, well, let's talk vibe. Because
your vibe attracts your tribe is the saying.
Yeah. But if you're going to spend time with another person whose vibration is at a very different level to you, one of you has to change.
Yep.
Chances are, if you're the higher vibration, you're not bringing them up to you, right? You're going to go down to them. And that, to me, I was like, no, I don't want that. I want to be the lowest vibration person in my circle. I want to be being brought up by the other people because they're all at a higher vibration. I don't want to be the one that gets brought down to the lower vibration. So I'm just like, hey, I'm out, right? I don't want to be around you. And now this is, like I say, this is the one that is the wooiest of the woo. But I think that it's quite a real phenomenon. It wasn't until I saw the cymatics. But when I talk vibration, I think that in terms of training a dog is that I really try to meet the dog where they're at, right? Especially when we're just meeting. I want to try and show my energy level as being something that the dog represents as something like the self. So with some of the really high drive dogs that we have and that I, put the work into, it's madness, right? I got to meet them at their madness. And then other dogs, we have to be like, hey, I'll come down to your very calm state. I'll relax myself. I'll move slowly. I'll interact with you in a way that you recognize as being something like yourself. And then I'm going to, through training, I'm going to try and bring that vibration up and I'm going to attempt to bring you with me. And that's how we alter the states and moods and stuff. And so while, I'm very aware that this is very woo-woo, but everybody now can imagine that where like you don't turn up full of energy, boisterous and happy laughter to the terrified shutdown dog, right? We all approach the terrified shutdown dog slowly, carefully. We don't want to make it any worse. I want to meet you where you're at, connect with you at that vibration where you are, and then I want to try and get you to accompany me back to somewhere where we're happy together, right? So I won't carry on about vibration too much more because it's the wooiest of the woo, but it's definitely one that I reflect on. And on the Wednesdays when I talk vibration, because Wednesday, just within my normal rhythm, is like a production day, right? It's a day where I need to produce things. I prep for different things, but Wednesday is my day where I produce. And I convince myself each Wednesday that I'm at the vibration of productivity, right? Like I put myself into that state. And I'm very careful on the days where I need to be in that state. I'll be careful what allows my vibration to alter. And by that, I mean just the thoughts that go into my mind. I think it's really terrifying. I'm terrified of it at the moment because I'm so UFO obsessed with everything that's going on, how much time I spend on social media looking for answers. Because really what you're doing is you're allowing random people to put fucking thoughts into your mind, right? That's actually terrifying when you consider, like when you're doom scrolling, you're just allowing other people free access to your brain.
See how many times you've used
crazy people.
Time as a concept? As we've been talking about things, the measure of time.
Yeah.
I'm convinced now that the more you want to analyze the worth of anything, it's heavily scaled in time.
Yeah.
The other thing that I wanted to talk to you about while you're talking about your thoughts around vibrations, which I'm very much an advocate for. The older I get, the more wise I get and the more studies that I'm looking at. There's a company, I believe it started in the United States, called HeartMath. Have you heard of them before?
No.
Where they talk about how your heart, the rhythmic resonance of your heart, it's kind of like the Wi-Fi of your body. Mm-hmm. If you're in the room with somebody that you're vibrating well with, your heartbeats will match. Yeah. Especially when you're in love with somebody. When you're in love with somebody and you hold them close to your heart. And this is why people talk about when you're giving someone a hug, give them a heart hug. Mm-hmm. Like if you really want to embrace somebody and you really want to connect with that people, probably people out there who feel very uncomfortable about this, but there's also other people. Take Carol Ellis, Michael's wife. Mm-hmm. She always says to me every time she meets me and I give her a hug, she goes, "You give the best hugs." Because it's not like I'm trying to like eject her or get rid of her or something like that. I love Carol and Michael. They're wonderful people. Like I really like being in their presence. I don't want to just like give like this flippant little hug and then go boom and get away from me. They're people that I have a good vibration with. You're one of those people, like I like the vibration of you in the room and other people like that. This concept of HeartMath talks about how your heart can detect the type of person that you're around. like the rhythmic vibrations of your heart, how fast your heart is beating in anticipation of I like this person or I love this person or I don't trust this person. Your heart is telling you what the vibration of this other person is because it can feel it, and it is sort of like Wi-Fi trying to mesh with each other.
It's an electromagnetic field.
It is,
That's the funny thing. So like a lot of this stuff is really easy to dismiss as woo, and trust me, I'm with you on dismissing it as woo, but I've been down the rabbit hole on it and been like, oh wait, no, you do emit an electromagnetic signal that can be sensed by others. So like what we have in the past called intuition, or I just got a bad vibe from that person. What you're actually saying in that moment is I was able to sense their electromagnetic field and it was not in tune with my own. Like that's what you're actually saying. And there's all the science now to support that. So anyway, I'm going to keep carrying on because we'll get bogged down in the woo. All right. So the next Hermetic principle after vibration is rhythm, where we say that everything moves in cycles.
Rhythm is a dancer.
Yeah. But everything moves in cycles, and ups and downs, ebbs and flows, ins and out. Everybody can identify that within their lives. If you're in a peak, don't worry, that trough is coming. And if you're in a trough, don't worry, that peak is coming. It constantly moves, ebbs and flows. Knowing that is one of the really important things where it makes it very difficult to have the rug pulled out from underneath you when you understand that everything moves in cycles, right? When you're at the high, you can be like, okay, but this isn't how it's going to be. I'm going to enjoy the high for sure, but I'm not going to expect that this is forever. And so you don't burn your bridges, like these are the things where you sort of maintain the ability to move up and down in cycles. And when you're at a trough, this too will pass. Don't worry.
What do you mean when you said don't burn your bridges?
Well, just because things are going well for you now, there's a lot of different ways to interpret that. One being, and how I sort of think about it, is a lot of people leave their support networks behind when they don't need them anymore. All right. So like if you're in a low point in your life, your support network is super important. And then when people come out of that, they're like, oh, see you dickheads later. Everything's great for me. I'm out of here. And it's like, no, that got you here. You need to now try and bring it with you or maintain it so that when you come off this peak and come back down, that support network is still in place to help you get back up. In terms of burning bridges, I think that there's value sometimes in letting the bridges you burn guide your way forward. There's an old Viking saying, burn the fucking boats, right?
Yeah, that was during the Trojan Empire, wasn't it?
I'm not sure, to be honest.
I thought that was the Greeks who burned their ships.
It's definitely a Viking thing as well. They burn the boats on the shore, so there's no fucking way out of here, right? We have to win, and then we have to build new boats in order to leave to get back to Scandinavia. Like we have to win first. So the principle of rhythm, on practical terms, it reminds you to like schedule downtime, right? Understanding the principle of rhythm helps you avoid burnout, right? Where you get to the point where you're like, hey, things are going really well. I need to be careful and create a pit here. Like I can't keep riding the high the whole time. I need to intentionally create a rhythm here because the rhythm is coming. And if you just continually keep going up, that create the higher the peak, the lower the trough. So sometimes you got to be careful and insert an artificial trough within your life to maintain that rhythm at a time when it's helpful for you. Take a break.
What's it saying? Calm seas don't make good sailors?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But understanding the principle of rhythm reminds us to celebrate those highs, right? And know like, oh, this is the high point. This is abnormal. This is something I should be into. What I write down on a Thursday morning when I think about the principle of rhythm is I sort of think about like, where am I at? It causes me to sort of think, okay, like in terms of peaks and troughs of my life, am I on the way up? Am I on the way down, right? The beauty of all these Hermetic principles is that they dovetail with each other, right? A lot of people say that actually all is mind is the only one because the rest of them are all just subcategories of all of this. But when you then think about rhythm, it's correspondence as well because you're like, okay, well, there's ups and downs, peaks and troughs, just like there's micro and macro. Understand one helps you understand another, move through that space. So thinking on that, and in terms of dog training, rhythm is something dogs identify super quickly and find patterns within. And one of the things that we constantly talk about when we're talking about dealing with nervous, reactive type dogs is set a routine for that fucking dog so that it knows what's coming. That's one of the points of rhythm. And rhythm exists in the macro in terms of setting that routine for that dog. And so the dog knows, oh, okay, we do this, we do this. I have really good parts throughout my day. I have really bad parts throughout my day, but I just have to get through those bad ones in order to get to the good ones. And when he finds that rhythm, he'll be much more level throughout because he knows there's a balance here, if you've got the dog that had a shitty existence, you have to show it, hey, your life is awesome. It's good again, but there's difficult times. I'm not going to be home all the time. You've got this wild separation anxiety. I'm not going to be here all the time. There has to be peaks and troughs in here, right? And then even we find that in the individual training sessions within the dogs is keeping a rhythm to your reinforcement schedules and all that kind of stuff, right? The rhythm to the way that you move. You ever see people who just can't get a dog to heel to save their fucking life because they walk in a weird gait and there's no rhythm to the way that they do it and the dog can't find the pattern? Rhythm is about patterns. Dogs are opportunistic scavengers. The way they stay alive is they find the fucking patterns. That is what a dog does. It finds the pattern, it identifies a rhythm, it fits within it.
Yep.
It works for us in the broader view of our lives. It's a principle by which the universe works, but it's a true thing that is actually going to make you better with a dog. The next one is polarity, right? And what we say of polarity is everything is dual, everything has poles, everything has a pair of opposites. Opposites are the same, they vary only by degree. The thing of polarity is we think of like at a spiritual level, they talk about like love and hate, right? It feels like they're total opposites. They are opposite ends of the same spectrum, right? But they are still on the same spectrum. It's like when we talk about temperature, there's hot and there's cold. There isn't a good or a bad one. And at what point does hot become cold, right? So like if you can imagine that scale, where one end of it is 0 Kelvin or whatever they call it, like absolute zero, and the other is as hot as it can get. It's inside the center of the sun. Whereabouts on that spectrum does cold become hot, right? Where does it happen? Because they're just temperature. It's not that cold and hot really exist entirely of themselves. They're just degrees of the same thing.
Excess cold can do as much damage as excess heat.
Yeah.
They both can maim and kill and destroy.
Exactly. When we think about in terms of like, how do I feel today? How you feel, whether it's great or terrible, is still on the spectrum of the opposite of whatever you want. And you have the capacity within all his mind to reframe these things around however you would like to feel. It's not easy. Like this is a thing.
And it's not immediate.
No, fuck no. And it takes the work. It takes a lot of work and continual over time, changing your thought patterns, changing your beliefs. But understanding polarity means that you sort of get to the point where you go like opposites are just varied degrees of the same. And I don't ever really want to be at the poles of anything. I want to sort of, hang around more in that middle, more moderate space. The way that I often relate this to dog training, you see a solution can be the solution to the opposite problems. An example is you see those dogs that have very flat and have next to no food drive. They don't want to eat. You can't train with food with those dogs. So those dogs that have off-tap food drive and lose all of their clarity and when they are in the presence of food can't think clearly, can't train with food with those dogs.
Yep.
It's the same solution to the exact opposite problems, which tells us that that problem is on a spectrum of motivation and too low is no good, but too high is also no good, right? There's a sweet spot in the middle and that's where we want to be.
We want to be in the Goldilocks.
Yeah. So understanding the principle of polarity, I think about that every Friday. I sit down in the morning and I just kind of go like, what today is going to have those dual nature to me?
Explain dual nature. What's dual?
Well, everything is dual in that it is hot and cold. It is good and bad. It is up and down. Anything that is moving away from something and towards something else, right? So like there isn't ever a static nature of anything. Nothing is. It's always on a spectrum and it has a strength and a weakness.
So when you're saying dual, you mean Joule?
No, dual, DUAL. Dual.
Oh, dual.
Yeah. It is dual. Dual.
Gotcha.
Everything has poles.
Right. Gotcha. Now I'm vibing with you.
And when I think of polarity, that's what I think. I sit down and I think, okay, where's the spectrum in this, right? And do I like where I'm at on this spectrum? Do I want to move? And often if something is at one end of something, what is the opposite of that? And would I like that more, right? Like think about that kind of stuff and sort of determine it. There's no right or wrong answers in this. It's just sort of your own thought process
it's
around
scalable. Like that's the important thing. And that's if we reflect that on, this is very much about the representation of being a balanced trainer is because it's scalable and you can be right in the middle. You can be further to one end or you can be further to the other end depending on the subject matter at the time.
Yeah, I was going to try and not open that door, but you did. So let's walk through it.
Yeah.
The ultimate example to us in the dog training space is that we have of polarity. is that we have the force-free crazy zealots that like don't put tension on the leash no matter what.
Walk your dogs into having a seizure.
Yeah, into another dog having a seizure, yeah. And then there's the like nothing but yank and crank, like old school terrible style dog training. Those people are the same.
Yeah.
Those people are the same fucking lunatics, right? They just are at opposite ends of the same spectrum.
Yep.
Those endpoints are the dangerous
They're
ends.
imbeciles at each end.
That's right, yeah. And the further we get from that, the more central we go, then the more comfortable that we typically are and the more capable that we really are, the further that you get from the poles. So I think that in terms of, for us as a dog training space, that's a very good example of polarity. That I think most people, unless you are one of those fuckwits, then you can't see it, but like most people can identify like, oh, you're just the opposite of that moron. We see this in politics all the time, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Nobody at the extremes is any good. You don't want the extremes. On Saturdays, on the 6th day of the week, I think about the principle of cause and effect. What we say of cause and effect is that every cause has its effect, but every effect has its cause.
Yep.
Right? Again, that's almost the same thing as our correspondence, right? As above, so below. But then also mentalism as well. In the beauty of cause and effect, and this is the one that I think about the most when I write this stuff down, and I really truly get into my own mind on, is that someone else can do something that triggers a reaction from you, but you are not bound to that reaction. What happens to you, you're not in control of. What you are in control of is how you react to it. And I always think to myself, when I want to react in haste or when I think somebody is pushing me to do something, right? Like if I get a sense that this has happened and now I have no choice but to do this, I do have a choice. There's always a choice. Just some might not like the consequences of my choices, but you do always have that choice. And I think then, okay, if my effect, you've done the cause, now it's going to have an effect on me, but the actions I take are going to be the cause of somebody else's effect. Right. And so then I have to think, well, do I want that? Because I maybe want to react to what you've done in a particular way, but I then want to think through what's the consequence of that? Like, how does that affect others? Or how does that affect a bigger picture? How does that affect something else?
Or how does it affect my internal struggles?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because when we start talking about cause and effects, we're really analysing the ABCs, the antecedent, stimulus, the behaviour and the consequence.
Exactly. In dog training terms, like, there isn't a more clear one, the principle of cause and effect, as you just said. Like that everything is caused by something.
There's been times where somebody has done something, which is the antecedent, and I have been expected to behave in a certain way because that's how I would normally behave. But I think when you become analytical to it and aware of the control that it has over you, rather than react, you need to freeze in that moment and you need to really contemplate this out and play it out in your head. That for me has been such a relief in who I am and who I'm becoming, just that little moment of pause that people will say something to me and then expect an immediate fiery response where I've been able to sit with that and think, I don't need to say anything. I can choose to say nothing at all. And there have been times. There have been things that I've seen on social media where I thought, oh, I'm going to say something about that. And I thought, I don't really need to.
Yeah.
I don't need to be one of the people who says something about that to try and validate myself or fall into the bear trap of then getting exposed as the villain in the story because that's what people expected of me to do. And then say, haha, look at Glenn, fell right into my trap. Where I can just say, I abstain from it. You know, I abstain from having any feelings or thoughts or reactivity to this. I've exposed myself for being completely not perfect. I'm not even trying to be. Perfection is an illusion. It's just a myth. I'm just a guy on a spinning rock traveling through the universe trying to do my best. A friend of mine who is quite a successful business guy, he was at a meeting the other day with a bunch of stuffy people and they said to him, so what do you do? And he said, I just do my best. and he goes, every day I just get up and just
do the best I can.
Just do the best I can. And I thought, what a fucking amazing classic answer.
Yeah.
I just do my best. You know, that's all we're all trying to do is we are trying to do our best. There's days that you're going to fail at that, but that's okay because that's part of these principles that you're desperately trying to finish up on.
All right. So cause and effect is a pretty obvious one. I sort of write down on that and sort of think about not just how I will do. I'm the cause of other people's effects. So I want to be conscious of that, right?
Yeah.
And do that with intention rather than haphazardly or accidentally affecting others, right? You can't help but affect others. It's going to happen. But I much prefer to do that with intention and do it on purpose rather than just letting it happen.
Paying a compliment to something that we've already talked about, that's something that I'm really complimentary to you for initiating this, was at club where you stopped people from talking ill of other people at club.
Well, I didn't have to stop it. I just
You didn't have to stop it.
It's not that it was ever happening, but I made it very clear that that's not something that we were ever going to do.
Yes, that's more of an accurate description of what's a fact, is that there wasn't a bad vibe down there. People were coming down to train their dogs, but we all agreed as a group that let's do that. Let's make that our core focus is at the end of training, go home.
Yeah.
Wish everyone well.
Yeah.
Say something supportive and kind and something positive about the group and just finish on that.
Yeah.
Just go home, shake each other's hands, give each other a hug. That's it. And that's what's happening. And it's a nice thing to experience. And it's an unusual thing to experience in some of those groups because that's not traditionally what has happened over periods of time in different continents and cultures and so forth. Is then people get around and think, oh, let's talk trash about people.
Yeah.
You know, let's pull them down.
It came about from someone actually sort of making an accusation that something was said about somebody at club. And I had to admit, I was like, if that was the case, I've got no idea because I'm busy training dogs. Like I at no point at club get to sit down and hang out with anyone because I'm either in the suit doing the training or I'm assisting the people handling the dog. Like as a training director, I don't stop.
You're doing your thing.
Yeah. And between dogs, we talk shit, but I just talk about aliens, right?
Yeah.
Like if we're training out here, I'm like, do you guys see that? Do you see that movie with this guy? And when we're at my shop, I talk about how the ghost is good. We have to rush, guys. We have to be out of here by 10 o'clock or the ghost will come out and get us. So like, it's just nonsense that I'm talking. It's not like there's no structure to any of it. But then I realized I was like, oh, I don't know. And I don't think the guys, I certainly they weren't. But I then said like, no, we're here to talk about dog training, right? Like that's what we're doing. If you got some personal thing, like no worries. If you've got something to discuss, you discuss it. But we're not here to shit on anybody.
In a constructive manner.
Yeah, that's right.
Rather than deconstructive, it's about construction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that is important. Like that maintains the integrity of the group as what we are, like maintains our mission. This is what we do together. And I think as well, like it's one of the things, you know, we're a little bit off topic, but one of the things I think is important in clubs is that, or in your life, is you have other shit going on.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's super important that you have other shit going on. And with the guys at club, my job is training dogs. My passion is training dogs and my hobby is training dogs. So I've got to have other shit. I've got to have other stuff. So like in terms of what I do elsewhere, like I don't want to add any more dog stuff to my fucking list. It's such a huge amount of my life.
And you don't want that well to be poisoned as well.
So it's why I don't like, it's why, you know, not that Jane has any interest in it. It's not that I control her, but I'm glad she's not in dogs at all. I don't want her involved in dogs because I want to be with her talking about our kids and our life rather than anything to do with fucking dogs. She loves the dogs and loves our dogs.
But in a different way.
Yeah, in a totally different way.
In a family way.
And if I try and talk to her about Remy and who he is in the working space, she humors me.
But her eyes glaze over.
Yeah, she doesn't give a fuck.
Yeah.
Right? Like
it's not important to her.
It's important to her that me and him
yes.
are together and doing the things, and she always creates that space for me. There's always there.
What's important to her is supporting your passion.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I love that she's not involved. We did a whole episode on when, remember there was someone asked us, how do I get my partner involved? And I was like, don't.
Yeah.
It's the best thing not to. The final Hermetic principle, the seventh one, what I think about on Sundays is the principle of gender. And it says that the gender is in everything. Everything has a masculine and feminine principles. And
how dare you, sir?
Yeah. Well, the thing of this is, and I think this is something that me and you are pretty good at, I can choose which part of me. Like your personality is multifaceted. You can be super nurturing. You yourself, I as well, can be very nurturing, but you can also be rock hard as well. You can be like, no, this is how it's going to be. You can be very analytical. You can be, you know, all the things that are sort of usually attributed to a masculine energy. Now, we're not talking male and female, right? Like that's a totally separate thing. Yep. We're talking just the energies of masculine and feminine energy. There's times when a feminine energy serves best. And one of the things that I am very okay with is fulfilling that role at a time when people might not expect that. But if that version of me, if showing those feminine attributes attributes that are usually assigned to feminine energy is empathy, intuition, nurturing, collaboration, compassion, those sorts of things. They're your feminine energies. And your masculine energy is going to be more like assertiveness, protection, construction, those sorts of things. I think that too often we can sort of define ourselves as being like, no, I'm an assertive person. And you're like, okay, that's cool. But sometimes that's not going to get the job done. Right? Like when I'm dealing with my 3-year-old, sometimes I'm very assertive, right? For sure. No, this is how it's going to be because I'm teaching you to be a functioning human in the world and this is how it's going to go.
Yep.
But then a moment later, I can be like, hey, I get that this is hard for you. Like I get that this is difficult. Like it still has to happen, but the feminine energy in me is going to nurture you through this, right? And I think that that dual aspect is very important. But you see how like the dual aspect of that relates to polarity, and it all ties in together.
Indeed. To add to the example that you just gave, my understanding and contemplation of that came when I understood where I need to be and who I need to be when I'm training dogs that are struggling. You know, especially young, fearful dogs or fearful dogs for that matter, who are really struggling with a masculine energy form when you're coming at them with strength and power and that manifestation of that hard male figure, where really what they need is that feminine energy. They need you to be compassionate and supportive and so forth. And that's why a lot of the times where men struggle to train a certain type of dogs, women get in and they fill that spot very well.
Yeah.
And that's why I think so many women have been very successful in picking up with a lot of these damaged dogs because they make up the vast majority of dogs that are on the face of the planet.
Yeah, that's right.
You can see that. So if you can't emulate that in yourself, if you can't modulate your polarities and change who you need to be and, dare we say it, develop those frequencies, you're going to be unsuccessful at your job.
Yeah. Just to be clear again on the principle of gender, within everything there is a masculine and feminine energy.
Yep.
And I think what I sort of remind myself of each day or each Sunday when I do that one is I am able to call upon the part of me that will serve the people around me the most, right? And I can be ultra assertive. I can be those things, but I can also be nurturing and compassionate. I have the capacity to do that. It's not easy. It doesn't come naturally. It's something that I have to call upon, but it's there. I do have the ability to do it. It's not easy. And it's important to remember that like when we talk feminine and masculine energies, it's got nothing to do with whether you're a male or a female. It's nothing to do with that, right? You can get extremely masculine energy women and similarly you can get feminine energy men. It's got nothing to do with your actual body that you're in.
It's like the movie I Love You Man, where at the start of the movie, he's very feminine in the way he behaves and he doesn't really have any male friends or relate to any males.
Yeah.
And then when he does make friends with a very masculine energy sort of person, he has a bit of a transition over to becoming a bit more masculine in the way he behaves. Hilarious movie.
Slabberdaboos. That's Slabberdaboos, man.
It's a terrific movie. I'm probably on my 20th time watching that movie.
Yeah. All right, so they're the 7 Hermetic principles. And like I say, it's easy to think of those in terms of being fairly woo, but I don't. The vibration one's a little bit, there's science that backs that up.
They're tools, and tools are there to be used as needed and required. And that's with most things that we do in life. The same thing when we're training dogs is we have an array of tools before us, and there is a responsibility around the selection and use of those tools.
Exactly.
It takes time to master the use of them. So when you talk about those Hermetic principles, all that sounds to me is the pursuit of a better life.
Yeah, exactly. What we like to do around this time every year is I like to try and throw some fuel on the fire of positivity.
Yeah.
I promise you, if you attempt to do something like this, keep a record. Like I'll admit there's days where I just write down the heading and the catch cry and nothing else, but that's enough. In fact, I could show you today's because I was writing. I've been up since 4:30 this morning out training dogs with Jazz. And this morning when I was sitting out there waiting for you to come out of the shower, I wrote down gender and all I wrote is the masculine and feminine exist in all things.
Yep.
That's enough, right? Like I'll fill that out later on, but just sort of identifying that and reminding myself of each one of these principles each day helps me be the best version of myself that I'm capable of being that day.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the best version ever, but the best that I can be that day.
Yeah, perfect.
And I still will do the daily reflections from time to time. But now what I've actually aligned myself to being much better able to do is at the end of the day, I actually can use those daily reflections. If at the end of the day, I don't feel like I achieved much, if I'm not happy with how things went, I'll do that. And I just list all the things that I did. And by halfway through those things, I'm like, oh, holy fuck, I did a lot, right? Because it's easy to forget. It's very easy to be negative towards yourself. We do the pep talks, we do the circle jerk. My advice or goal, or, I'm just putting it out there, you do what you want with it. But just thinking about and trying to weave into your life the ideas around those Hermetic principles has helped me a ton. And the beauty of them is they're eternal and they're universal. You can have any religion you want, from being a devout Catholic or whatever to a staunch atheist. It doesn't matter. That's why I haven't told you the history of them because the history could give you feelings about following them, but they are true nonetheless.
It's times like these I steal a line from Step Brothers where the father is giving an important speech at the end and he says, "Listen to me, don't listen to me, prestige worldwide." Anyone in particular who's inspired you greatly this year?
Yeah, Theo, who's at the club.
Love Theo.
Love him.
Yeah.
He's one of the people that I just like his vibe. That's why I invited him to work for me. He does a great job actually working for me, but I would have still employed him even if he didn't because I just like being around him, and he has a really type of energy that I want to emulate towards. And I'm careful because I'm aware of that. I try to make sure that I put myself in a position to have my vibration increased by him rather than his lowered by mine.
From the moment I met Theo, which he did the NDTF course with me originally, I liked him immediately. He brings an energy to everything. He's smiling, he's positive, he's curious. Like that lovely childlike curiosity that you were talking about before, where you saw that neighbor getting fizzed out by bubbles. Theo has that kind of outlook to life. Dom has that. They're almost like...
Yeah, they're very similar.
Yeah, they're sharing a pole for sure. But people like that are very inspiring to be around. There's been times where I've talked about my great friend Ron on the show before. Ron, for me, is one of those people that I could be in the darkest stage of my life, and there have been times where I've been in dark stages and I've had a conversation with him and he just brings hilarity to life. He just sees art and culture and fun and mischief, and he's kind of like a good form of Loki. He's just the best person to be around when you're in that frame of mind, and they're wonderful, infectious, inspiring people to share a timeline with. It's kind of like having an angel when you're with those type of people. They're very...
Yeah, well, they're just that high vibration that you aspire to be at.
Naturally, I wanted to give a shout out to Narelle because she's certainly been one of the people she's very inspiring to me nonetheless. I've watched her working feverishly this year and she puts far, far more effort than what she gets back from it. We're very far from running all the way to the bank when you start off a small business, but the effort and the work and the discipline that Narelle puts into herself and what she's doing for other people has been nothing short of inspirational. She makes me want to be a better man. There's many people in my life that help me be a better person. And one of the things that I've always appreciated about her is that she's not just quick to take my side when I'm wrong about things. And even though I've got mad with her about that before, where I've thought, you haven't supported me in something that I've got big feelings about, when reflecting on it, I've thought to myself, no, you're actually right.
She supported you entirely.
She supported me entirely.
Didn't enable you necessarily.
Correct. That's one of the most wonderful things about having somebody in your life that's like that, is that even though you don't think it's right, it's right. The other thing that when we're talking about the concept of time and how important time is now in the back of my mind all the time, I read some feedback that Narelle got, and the person said, I'm just wanted to let you know that my dog passed away, but I just want to thank you for all the extra time you gave me. And then it kicked me back into thinking about Ladybug, how she started this journey off, even though we were in a very dark time at that point. But when you've been sharing this story on Hermetic principles, it really relayed to me on the thoughts and feelings that we were having about something that was completely chaotic and out of our control, something that Narelle never had intentions on becoming or doing or developing. And then that whole unfortunate transition transformed her into becoming something that is now given time to other people. You, me, and all the other dog trainers that we know of, and all the people that are involved in healthscape around the world, the veterinarians, the doctors, all those people, they're adding value, they're adding time to our lives, to our pets' lives and so forth. Sometimes it isn't thought of and appreciated in the way that it should be. Certainly for me, I've been very transformative in being more educated about helping our dogs live a better timeline in eating better and being healthier and stuff like that. And even for me this next year, I've realized I've lived a pretty slothful year in 2024. I've been indulgent in eating too much, in putting on weight and stuff like that. And I've been thinking, you got to step this up. Your wife is very much about living, and she lives a healthier lifestyle. When I see her preparing her own meals and so forth, she eats enough to sustain herself. She eats healthy meals. She supplements very well, where I'm very neglectful of that. And it's not very fair to her in support of what she's doing and how she's growing in her field when I'm slobbing out on food, eating too much treats and so forth. But it's not about doing this for Narelle. It's about doing this for me, but being inspired by the good work that she's doing. The other thing that I've been very appreciative of is not only have I transitioned into this thought of being more holistic about what I can do on a behavioural sense and now on a holistic sense with dogs, other people are now stepping up as well, like people that I didn't expect to do it. People who have been very marginalised in those sort of areas are now coming up and saying, hey, man, I've been listening to your podcast with you guys and it's inspired me to think about this on a deeper level. There is evidence to support it. And that's what I want people to do, is not just listen to me and think I've got a product to sell, so I'm motivated by this, which may have played a selfish part in it. But the reality of it is that it's transcended into something else. Like it's now a movement where I can see other people doing it and stepping up and talking to me about it, and the conversations they're having where they're coming forward and saying, I wasn't sure about this at the start, but now I can see the difference. Like I can see the incremental change in my dog getting better and me getting better in these type of things. And that's why it's inspired me to want to be better myself, not just about my dogs, but about my own health and about my own fitness and stepping up and stepping to the plate and being accountable to those type of things as well. So thanks, guys, for sticking with me and helping your own dogs be the best version of themselves, because that means a lot to me now. We went all over the United States and we listened to some fucking horror stories of people that have been getting some really terrible advice, but being able to transition on that and being able to do their own research and look into things deeper and find out that sometimes the story that we've been told has been backed by millions of dollars in marketing finances. And we're conditioned, we're very susceptible to believing those things because we think we're doing the right thing, but we've never researched away from that. We've been corralled and guided into a way of thinking that may not be factual. So dig a little deeper, do your own research. If somebody tells you something, it doesn't mean that it's gospel. It gives you an opportunity to look into it a little bit deeper yourself. And there's so many tools and resources that are available to all of us to do that.
Amen.
Amen.
All right. That's it. That's Circle Jerk.
Yeah.
You've got your pep talk for 2025. Do your journaling. If you care, think about some Hermetic principles.
Sure.
I'm optimistic about 2025. I think it's going to be awesome.
Well, it can be whatever you want it to be. It's unwritten.
I've chosen awesome.
When I was an electrician, when I was doing my apprenticeship, I used to work with this guy called Gary Brayley. Every day I'd get in the car with Gary. He was one of the most funny and upbeat sort of guys. But he used to say to me every time I hopped in the car with him, and I was like 16 at the time, he used to say, Glenn, today is a brand new day, unhindered by everything else. What could possibly go wrong?
Perfect.
That's how he started every day.
Yeah,
I used to quote it with him when I got in the car. I'd say it and we would repeat it together, and it would always make me smile.
Yeah, fuck yeah, that's cool.
It would always make me laugh. Gary always brought a smile to my face every time I worked with him.
I like that.
Yep.
All right. That's it. Another episode, Canine Paradigm.
Yeah.
If you like what you hear, just like it.
Do that.
Share it. Subscribe it.
Do that.
Write it in your journal. Be like, I like the Canine Paradigm. Dear Diary, I listened to these two dickheads. They're 300-something episodes in. Can't believe I still listen. Writing it down in my little book here. And then whatever day it is, write down the appropriate principle and just write a bit more.
The appreciation is always something that I take great delight in reading, like sharing. Sometimes people are very shy or embarrassed to reach out, but when they do, they kind of say, I've been meaning to do this, but I thought you would think I'm a dick for doing it.
No, it's incredible.
No, it's great. Love it. Yeah.
I've got a folder. I screenshot all of it. I screenshot them all and I put them into my little folder of feedback. When people are mean to me, I go and cry and read that folder. All right. So do all the liking, rating, sharing. But if you want to support us, you could give us some money.
Yeah,
We like money. Money, it's just a form of energy, but it's energy that pays our bills and buys us cool new microphones. So you could give us some of that. You could do that through Patreon if you want to, or not, whatever. Like, don't get bogged down. But $3 a month gets you a giant backlog of information, as well as new stuff going forward. You could pay $10 and hear me waffle shit for 2 hours and answer questions all the time.
Or you could just do a Barbara de Groot and just tip
give us
money.
give us as much as you like,
Yeah.
or none, whatever you feel like.
Yeah.
If you want to get in touch with us,
Did we say spring? Did we talk about spring?
get a t-shirt, get a fucking t-shirt.
Did you see people have been buying each other Christmas presents? I've been posting it up on Insta. Like
Have you?
Yep,
That's
they've
awesome.
been saying I was so happy to get my Canine Paradigm hoodie or
That's a great idea.
yeah.
Start working on Easter presents, everybody.
Yep.
Get
Get a hot cross bun and a
We get a few bucks a shirt. We need that. We need it.
yeah.
We need it. All right.
Hot cross bun and a tapestry. That's what I was
There you
trying
go.
to say. Yeah.
There you go. Okay, and if you want to get in touch with us, jump into the Facebook discussion group. It's called the Facebook discussion group. The Canine Paradigm discussion group. It's a good one. Lots of people in there. No one's a dickhead. If you are, we just say, hey, be a dickhead somewhere else. But if you want to get in touch with us directly, shoot us an email. We are info@thecanineparadigm.com. Love you all.
Happy New Year.
Happy 2025. It's going to be a good one, so long as aliens don't come and kill us all.